All right, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 149 of the Geeks with Wives podcast. I'm your host this week, Joe Barhoum, recently nicknamed as the guy that pays the bills. I don't know if that'll stick. It's a little long. But we're going to go for it. We have a really amazing show for you guys tonight. But first, let me introduce the full Geeks with Wives team. Okay, there's me, done. No, wait, there's Kenny too. Kenny Newville. Kenny, say hello to the internet.
Hello, internet.
You could have said more, but we'll keep it at that.
I follow directions. You told me to say hello to the internet. I said hello to the internet.
That's good. That's good.
I told the company line, Joe.
You really do. And for those of you listening on iTunes or perhaps Stitcher or even directly from our website, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and find the video from our channel for this particular show because Kenny shaved. Any comment, Kenny? Oh, they just okay. Yeah, good.
Definitely
good.
Goes to the video for that.
Yeah,
go for the
on iTunes.
Good for the listeners.
And that masculine voice you hear is none other than a senior PlayStation editor for IGN, Colin Moriarty.
Beyond. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. We're going to try and make it at least a yearly tradition, maybe weekly. Sure. I don't know. Who knows what happens in the next hour?
I don't know. I'll have to consult my schedule. I'll consult my schedule and we'll figure it out.
And also joined by one of my favorite podcast hosts, truly amazing, from the GamersWithJobs.com website and the Gamers with Jobs conference call, Shawn Andrich.
You're entirely too kind, but I'm really glad to be back. It's fun to be here.
Oh, thanks a lot. We did something right the first time with you two guys, so it's wonderful to have you back. Hopefully we don't blow it this time, but you never know. We certainly have a controversial topic that we're going to talk about, so I'm going to lay out the show for everybody watching or listening, and again, thank you for joining us today. So we are going to first start by talking about the games we're playing, and I'll just sneak peek, Rogue Legacy will come up. It just has to happen. It's too great on Vita. And then we'll also talk about our topic of the week, which is basically how our approach to video gaming has changed since we were kids, which will be a really nice way for everyone to hear the evolution of our own personal experience with video games and where we are now. I think we're all in our 30s, so that should be kind of interesting to see how we changed, if there's any similarities. The controversial part, though, of today's show will be to talk about desert island gaming. It'll be a really quick segment, but we're definitely going to talk about that and follow up on the Twitter conversation we had with our community just a few weeks ago. We'll end the show with our final thoughts. That's where we take 1 to 2 minutes to talk about anything we want, and as long as we keep it clean, it should be good to air. No worries there. So let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to start with Kenny Newville. Kenny, what games are you playing?
I am playing a game. I am playing Rogue Legacy. Been looking forward to this one for a long time. Actually, one of the first times I heard about it was when Shawn was on the show, and he discussed it when it came out for PC a year ago. Looking forward to it. Kind of had this idea that it was going to come to PlayStation eventually. I don't know where I got that idea, and here I am. The wait is over. I love it. So I know that I know a few other people are playing on the cast right now, and I haven't decided whether I prefer it on the PS4 or the Vita yet. I'm not even going to touch the PS3 version. There's no reason to. I like the portability of the Vita, and obviously it fits well with the Vita and what Sony's going for with that console. But I really just like the way it looks on my television on my PlayStation 4. So, Colin, I'm curious. I think I heard you say one time that you preferred it on the Vita, and I just didn't know if that's because of the bite-sized chunks or what's that reason?
I just think the platforming is really good. So, like on a Vita, when you're playing a game like that, it's like Shovel Knight on 3DS. Like I kind of liked it on Wii U. I really loved it on Wii U actually, but it also made a lot of sense on 3DS because it just felt like it was that old school experience, that bite-sized experience, like you said. But a lot of these games just feel really at home on Vita. Like a lot of these cross-player, so-called tri-play games that are on PS3, PS4, and Vita. I prefer playing them on Vita. It was the same thing with Pixel Junk Ultimate, which I was playing, for weeks a couple months ago. So I think it's really special on Vita. I really love it on Vita. I too have been spending a lot of time with it on Vita, and I just finally beat it last night. I'm going to go back for more New Game Plus and try to get those trophies. That one trophy to beat the game in 15 tries or under seems borderline impossible. So I want to see. We'll see. Can't make any promises.
That's brutal. That's brutal. Well, and the other thing I might point out, and this probably has been your experience, as we were talking pre-show. I have a child. I have a 10-month-old, and so it's nice to be able to pick up the Vita, press the PS button, put it down, pick it back up, jump back in, play it, put it down, because the 10-month-old doesn't stay situated for very long now. She's crawling all over the place. As a matter of fact, I've got a game paused right now where I'm about 10,000 gold. It's a good run. I've got like maybe 5 health left. I'll probably promptly die after this episode of Geeks and Wise. I'll pick it up and lose my rhythm. Joe, what do you think? You've been playing. Have you played it on the PS4 yet? I told you to check it out there.
Yeah, you did tell me to, but I've got the 5-month-old problem where she's constantly needing to be held, carried, fed, something, rocked, sang to, you name it. So I can't put myself to sit down on the couch and fire up the PS4, particularly since the PS4 doesn't have true standby capability yet, like the Vita does. So I'm still very much playing it on the Vita. And in fact, going back to the whole kid situation, tonight when I came home from work, the nanny left. It's just me and the baby. I got her in her little bouncer. She started bouncing around, listening to music, grabbed the Vita, slowly move over to the bouncer, kneel down, start playing. Within 5 minutes, she was done with the bouncer, and so I just hit the standby button, and I'll resume it sometime tonight. When I'm lying in bed, it's really comfortable to play it on the Vita.
Or in 5 years or so. Like it really, there's a really long span you may go. I'm always shocked at the people who reach out to us, like email in, like games they started before their kid was born, they didn't get back to till their kid was in kindergarten.
Now, a game that you guys have been talking about a lot, Shawn, on your show, the Gamers with Jobs conference call, is Divinity. Divinity Original Sin.
Correct.
So that to me feels like it's such an old school looking game. I haven't played it yet. I'm afraid of it because I have a kid.
You should be.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm driving at. So you would not recommend it to those listening who have
that
kids?
Would not. That would be, again, that would be one of those, probably grade 1, grade 2 by the time you finished it. It took me about 90 hours to finish Divinity Original Sin. I couldn't even tell you what the last game I'd spent that much time on single player getting to the end. And not only that, but I cranked through 90 hours. It could probably 2 weeks, like maybe a little more, but it was about that. It was a couple of real heavy weekends because it just completely devoured me utterly. Because it's so good, but because it's not like World of Warcraft where you get a quest, you go to the question mark, you do the thing, you kill the thing, you talk to the person, you go to the next question mark, and then you finish the quest. So you could leave World of Warcraft for 6 months, come back, and see and know exactly what you need to do. It's very simple. In Original Sin, they really don't really orchestrate the next step necessarily. So you really have to rely on your observation, your memory. Oh, I remember this person said that thing. Oh, right, and there's a mortuary over there, so maybe I should go there to find a body. It won't tell you go to the mortuary. You've got to remember all this stuff, or maybe the graveyard or something like that. So if you leave for a month or a week, you're not going to remember like what you were thinking or what was going on. It's just not going to work. So as much as I love Divinity Original Sin's old school mentality and the way it kind of makes you work for it a little bit more, it's not pick up and play friendly in any way, shape, or form. It's going to demand a pretty consistent attention throughout.
So it's pretty much on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of quest narration and navigation, right? It doesn't hold your hand at all. Is there room in the middle for a game like this?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, I think compared to the old school standards, I think Divinity Original Sin actually does sit in the middle. It does have a pretty healthy quest log, and it does log things like conversations, and so it does little things to help. And what it doesn't necessarily do is, say, fill out your map automatically when you're running around. You end up needing to actually open your map and pin stuff and type in what it is. Like, this is a point of interest here, and it's not going to just automatically tell you this is a point of interest. You actually have to suss that out. Is there a middle ground, though? I think the next step after Original Sin, you're back into exclamation points and question marks. Like, you're back to a more guided experience. And they both definitely have their place. I mean, Original Sin does tell you roughly what your next step may be. It's not going to leave you completely in the dark. It's not like playing Dark Souls where there's no direction at all. In fact, if you go left, you'll probably die, and if you go right, you might have a little bit more luck. I think Original Sin is kind of the middle ground.
Well, that's good to hear, but I guess I will still stay away from it. But to
All
answer
right.
your question, that's okay. I'm tempted every time I log into Steam. For some reason, it pops up and staring me in the face. As soon as it goes on sale for like even $1 off, I'm probably going to buy it. But Kenny, to answer the question that you asked me, 5 minutes ago before I spun off on this tangent, I'm playing Rogue Legacy, yes, but I'm also replaying the Zelda titles. I started with the original Zelda, played Zelda 2. I started playing Link to the Past, and at the same time, I was playing Link's Awakening because I was trying to do everything on the 3DS because it tracks my activity, has that standby function. I can save states if I need to, but they don't have a Link to the Past on the 3DS, so I had to fire up my GCW Zero, which is the Linux open source gaming handheld that Justin Barwick created. We've had him on the show a few times, but that it's not the same, right? It's still kind of it's just not right. It's just not doesn't feel the same as playing it on a Nintendo platform. So I may have to go back and fire it from my Super Nintendo. So I stalled a little bit because I had this conundrum with the 3DS and not being able to play Link to the Past. I didn't want to skip ahead and play Link's Awakening all the way through. So I'm sort of on a pause state right now, and I've actually been playing Diablo 3, Reaper of Souls. And man, this isn't good for me right now. I'm busy with work. We talked about the whole kid situation. I still have a wife that I need to give attention to, but I find myself wanting to play Diablo 3 every chance that I have. They really did a good job improving that game. I played it quite a bit when it first came out, 40, 50 hours, I think 2 or 3 years ago, whenever that was. And then I did get a little bit uncomfortable with the auction house and the loot system. This new update's been fantastic, so I am getting sucked in a little bit. And I think you're waiting for the PS4 version, right, Kenny?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm just going to give Blizzard far too much of my money. I bought it for PC when it came out, then I bought it for PS3, now I'm going to buy it for PS4. I'm ashamed of myself.
It happens.
Wait, is it
Someone
a
needs
better?
to tell,
Is
someone
it
needs to
better
tell
on
me
the
I work for a
console?
nonprofit. I mean,
Is it better on the console? Because if you've got it on the, if you played on the PS3 or you got it for the PS4, or you played on a PC, why triple dip? Like why buy it so many times? What is it about the console that's better than the PC?
well, I picked it up on the PC back when my desktop wasn't a steaming pile of garbage, and it has since died. And to
Okay.
re-up my tower or my gaming rig that I want would cost far too much money and too much time on my part. So when the PS3 version came out, I was like, that's awesome. And honestly, I prefer the controls with the gamepad, and I don't want to deal with the computer and gamepad situation. So the PS3 just worked very well for me, and now with the PS4, better presentation all around, more content. Of course, that clicker content that's drawing me to the PS4 as well, but not really. But obviously playing in the console experience, maybe even using remote play with my Vita, that's what's making me triple dip. So damn you, Blizzard.
That's a good time to transition to Colin whenever the word damn is used. Colin,
Yeah,
what are you playing?
Rogue Legacy, a lot of Rogue Legacy. Finished The Last of Us. Playing The Last of Us, I didn't get through it all the way, but I had a debug copy of The Last of Us on PS4. Jumped back into that. As we said on Podcast Beyond, that to me is required gaming, and I was really happy to go back into that game again and really immerse myself in that game again, even if it wasn't quite the same as it was the first time through. When that first special experience you had with it on PS3 in 2013 was really extraordinary, and I think you can make a good case that that's one of the best games of all time. So I think that was a cool experience. I was happy to do that. Resogun is always a constant in my life. I just absolutely adore that game. That game is just stellar. Housemarque is arguably the most underrated developer in the entire industry. The fact that no one talks about them with the respect that they really deserve with the games they make is surprising to me, so I'm really happy to keep playing that game. And I'm playing Tales of Exilia 2 on PS3, and that comes out in 3 weeks, I think. And I have a soft spot for Japanese games and JRPGs. I'm a huge Tales fan. Tales of Destiny is one of my favorite games of all time on the PS1, so I always try to pick up those games when they come out, and so I have a copy of that. So staying busy with all that kind of stuff and kind of just waiting for a moment to break into. I have like Danganronpa 2 and these other games that I have early. I just don't have time to play all these games. And Rogue Legacy has just ruined my life for the last 2 weeks. So I guess it hasn't even been 2 weeks, has it? It's been like a week. It feels like it's been a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a week tomorrow or a week today.
It feels like it's. I feel like I played that game, like done nothing but play Rogue Legacy for the last year. Like, I'm like laying in bed next to my girlfriend and playing it on Vita, and she's like, it's like all button clicking. It must be obnoxious. And she's eventually like, can you just go like somewhere else and play this? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't stop playing this game. I need just one. It's like it's that game, like one more run. You know, it has the same hook that Resogun has. Just one more time. I can do better this time. I can do better this time. Before you know it, it's 4 a.m. So
it's the same thing in my house. And sometimes when like my daughter is having trouble sleeping and she's in bed with my wife and I'm sitting there clicking, and my wife will just nudge me and say, "Go in the other room. Those buttons are too loud. You're gonna wake her up." I'm like, "Really?" So I go in the other room and play some more Rogue Legacy. Hey, could I roll you back a little bit there, Colin?
Sure.
You mentioned The Last of Us Remastered. Now that has been the one thing. I'm really kind of the point where I don't have enough time to play more than one video game in a month anyways anymore, and I certainly don't have the money to do it. Or at least I think I do. My wife doesn't. But The Last of Us or Diablo 3. I have The Last of Us for PS3, and I love the game. I reviewed it for Geeks and Wise. It's actually one of the first things I did for Geeks and Wise. Absolutely adore the game. My dad actually has my copy right now, and I haven't gotten it back for like over a year. I'll get it back eventually, but is the remastered version, is it worth it right now?
Not if you don't have the time. I said in the review, it's the only game, and I've been at IGN for 7 years. It's the only game I ever gave a 10 to. And we obviously gave 10 to the PS3 version, and then to Remastered, it's just a more beautiful, better running version of the game with more content. So obviously it's a nice deal, but I think it's one of those special deals that really resonates with two different groups of people. A lot of people that own PS4 statistically never owned a PS3, so they're in for something special. And like, it's one of those games where you almost wish you could take back your first playthrough and kind of wipe your mind so you can do it again, because that's how extraordinary I think that game was the first time through. At the same time, I think it's worth buying again if you have the time to play it. If you're looking at 5 different games and you have 1 month to play it, and you have more fun or you're with something else, or you're pulled in a different direction, then I think you should go in that direction. I do think that whether on PS3 or PS4, it's a must-play game. It's up. It really is up there with me. When we did our top 25 lists on IGN, our personal ones, that was way up there for me. I mean, that's up there with Super Mario World and Mega Man 3 and some really fantastic games. And so I really feel like people really owe it to themselves to play it. So is it worth double dipping? Maybe, maybe not, depending on your time situation, your money situation, all those kinds of things. But I really enjoyed it again, and that would be the 3rd time I played it. So, and plus I played it online on PS3 for like 45 hours, which is really weird because I hate playing games online. So I wanted those trophies.
Did you try playing it on the hardest difficulty, or did you kind of stick in the medium range?
I think I played it on normal and then hard, because at that time that like DLC difficulty that made it like really, really hard wasn't out yet. And the cool thing that the remaster does that the original didn't do is that all of the difficulty settings are unlocked immediately. Nice. So Last of Us on PS3 was very much like Uncharted, where you needed to beat it on hard to unlock crushing. So I didn't. When I play a game personally, I play it on hard because I like to play games on hard, and I again want the trophies. When I play them normally, when I play them for review, I play on normal because I want to experience them the way that the person playing the game will probably experience the game. So I kind of screwed myself. I would have had to play the game like 4 times to get to that difficulty level. So I was like, yeah, it's great. It's a fantastic masterpiece of a game, but I can probably spend my time in better ways than that. So I opted not to. But I hear that difficulty setting is friggin' horrifying, like grueling stuff.
Oh my god! I played maybe after I finished it, I played maybe 3 hours of no radar. Like there's just nothing to help you, and it's not impossible, but it does require. I think it kind of demands a lot of foreknowledge. It really demands that you've played through it before. I'd hesitate to recommend anybody who's never played before to start at the hardest difficulty, because it's really, really tough, and it'd be pretty frustrating.
That would ruin you emotionally, I imagine.
Well, beyond the actual story, yeah, absolutely would.
Ruin you emotionally, and yet ruin your gameplay. You think you're good, you think you're really solid, because that game really gives you a way to cheat on normal difficulty levels with the listen mode and stuff like that. So I couldn't imagine. It's very gamey in that way, and I couldn't imagine playing it without that. It would be very realistic, as realistic as a third-person shooter could be, I guess. But just it sounds awesome. Like it's one of those games where if I always have a palette of games to play for work. I very rarely have like a moment to ingest a game, a long game, a meaty game like that on my own. And I wish I could just take a week off sometimes and just just jump back in because I don't know, that game's really special. Naughty Dog really. I'm so interested in how they feel about the game internally, more candidly than they told me for the history of Naughty Dog, because that game is going to be so hard to beat. You know, whether it's Uncharted or a sequel to The Last of Us or a new IP, they are just so good. Really, probably the best AAA developer I think right now.
So, do you have any concerns about the recent departures at Naughty Dog, or is there still a certain standard for employment? So we should not be concerned about the future of some of their series.
So when I went there last year, I went there a little less than a year ago to do the history of Naughty Dog, to interview them. And I interviewed I don't know, it was 14 people or something like that. And one of the common themes I had, that they were telling me was, that they do have a standard for hiring, that everyone wants to work there, that they can really get the best of the best that they want, and they do want that. So is it concerning that Amy Hennig's not there anymore? Is it concerning that Justin Richmond left and some of these other guys, Nate Wells and all these guys? Yeah, sure, it's concerning, but people move on. The industry is very fluid, and they might have gotten different opportunities elsewhere or wanted to do something else. One of the things that's really interesting is that they talk a lot about the segue between Jack 3 and Jack X, and then over to Drake's Fortune, and how they lost a bunch of people at that time because they just didn't have a team of people that wanted to do a game like Uncharted. They had people that wanted to do a game like Jack, a game like Crash, and you have to assume that some of the people that had worked since Drake's Fortune all the way through The Last of Us, maybe they want to go do something else. So there's always young talent in the industry, new talent that they poach from other studios. I think they're going to be just fine. And Uncharted 4 is my most anticipated AAA game for sure, because you just know it's in good hands, especially with the team that made The Last of Us. So I'm confident.
Yeah, when I got my PS3, it was a birthday present from my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend, and really great birthday present. And the first game I got was Drake's Fortune, and it blew my mind. And I've been playing video games since I was 10 or something, I don't know, since I was a little kid, and it absolutely blew my mind. And ever since then, I feel like that endeared me to the PlayStation and all of Sony's products. I started really getting into a lot of their exclusive titles and started to learn who Naughty Dog are. So seeing retrospectives and things like what you guys have put together, it's a nice little icing on the cake. So is that it for games that we're playing, guys? Does anybody else have anything to add before we move on to our topic?
I think I've been on a real PC tear, so I've put a lot of time into Elite Dangerous in the last couple weeks, playing that. It's still in a very early, very real beta, broken non-marketing beta form. There's a lot of stuff in there that in Elite Dangerous that doesn't work, but as a PC space sim using a joystick and a throttle, it's just phenomenal. It feels so good, and it feels so cool to play the role of a space guy. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna do some trading, then I'm gonna go and fight some guys, and you're just kind of following your whim. You're not really given big heady missions. You're not given clear direction on everything you have to do. You just start in a spaceship, and you can just go earn money and get better spaceships. And it's basic. It's not something I'd say you want to spend the $25 premium on just to get into the beta necessarily if you're not really into the genre. But it's a beautiful comeback, and I'm even more excited now because I've just got my dev kit too for the Oculus Rift, and I've managed to just got it working before we started recording this. I've only managed 10 minutes in the game. I can't really understate how impactful that is, and how it does really feel like this is going to be something that's going to be really important to this industry in the next 5 years or so. Because when I've been playing Elite for a couple weeks, just me and my monitor and my my HOTAS setup and stuff, and it's cool, and I've really been enjoying it. When you're sitting in the cockpit, when you've got the Rift on and they've got the sound dialed in, so it really sounds like you're in there and you're looking around in the cockpit, and Elite's actually really the only game that's working with DevKit 2 properly right now. It's stunning. It's not perfect. There's still lots of I've got some juddering that goes on and lots of little things that definitely need to be worked on, but it's stunning. When you look down and you push up on the joystick and you see your in-game avatar's hand move up, and you've got that physicality of holding something, and you're sitting in your chair just like you would be sitting in the cockpit of a ship. It's I honestly I can't even compare it to anything in my history of playing games in terms of just the feeling like this really does foundationally change the way an experience of playing a game is. It's pretty stunning. So that's kind of going to be eating my brain for the next few weeks, is just trying to make the Oculus work with as many things as possible and giving feedback to developers who are working on beta stuff, and just being kind of part of this early pioneering part of this whole movement. Just it's so early and things are so broken and it's so exciting, and there's way more potential than there's actuality, but it's really cool. So that's been my gaming life for the last little bit.
Yeah, I've heard you guys talk about it on your show, and particularly last week, you guys did a nice little segment about joystick games and how relating to games from the past. I will actually, Kenny, I was on my PS4 the other day, not just my Vita, and I was going through the PlayStation Store just to see what's out there, and they had a game called War Thunder. So I watched the trailer, and I think it's a World War II. Air combat, and there might be some ground combat too, but the video featured a lot of air combat, and I started thinking back to when I was younger and I used to play Flight Simulator. My dad, he just loves Flight Simulator, thinks it's the coolest thing in the world, which they no longer make that game or that simulator, but you can get a fairly recent copy. They probably made one within the last 5 years. It probably still looks pretty good. I had a lot of memories of just kind of kicking back and trying to figure out how the heck to fly this thing and get to take off and then get in the air and where am I going to go. It's such a great feeling to be able to do that, even with a keyboard or a joystick on a 17-inch CRT when I was 15. I can't imagine, because I haven't used it before, what it's like on the Oculus Rift. Now, with your dev version that you have, what's the resolution?
It is 1080p. It's not pure 1080p on both eyes. It's more across both screens. So it's still like in DevKit 1, people talk about this kind of screen door effect because that was more of a 720p view. And you still get a little bit of that here. You get less of it. You don't get nearly as much of the smearing and the latency. It's much smoother, and I don't feel nauseous when I use it. But that's kind of the resolution it's at right now. I think one of the things they're going to need to do when they bring this thing to retail, the resolution it is now is not going to be good enough for retail. But the challenge they're going to run into is, in order to give it a resolution that's going to be good enough, being that close to your eye, you need a really good PC to run that. Like, I've got a pretty good box, and I'm, if you can't run your games at a good, steady 75 frames a second, you're going to have problems. So I think it's going to need to be more of a 1440p or something along those lines if you really want it to be kind of that perfect crispness you already experience on your monitor when you're just playing a game normally.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to play it, but I didn't know that. I was in Chicago for something for work, and at the time, my company's headquarters, and apparently it was just right there in the cafeteria, and people could go play. I had no idea, none whatsoever.
Really?
There's no company-wide email about it. It's like I completely missed out.
Yeah. I think they're going to get a lot of dev kits out. I think I bet we're at least a year before we see anything close to retail. So I think that we're going to see more and more of these things out in the wild, and people just, there's lots of, if you go to meetup sites and stuff, lots of people who get these, they're happy to set up, have local community, programming nights or whatever, and they all just come and try out the Rift. It's a great thing to just kind of, if someone's already got it, they've done all the tweaking, they've dialed it in, you just got to sit down, put it on, and just be blown away. It's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, I guess if there's anyone in Portland doing that, let me know.
Oh, Portland? Yeah, I think you'll be okay.
So before we launch into our topic, I thought it'd be kind of fun to take a few questions that we've been getting from the people watching. Is that cool?
Sure. Of course.
Some of them are personal. I'll do my best to screen them.
You must not listen to Podcast Beyond.
I'm an open book.
All right. Well, the first question's from Eric Jensen. He asks, this is for you, Colin, when are you getting married?
Eric Jensen. I know Eric Jensen. He works at Sony Bend. I don't know. Actually, my girlfriend and I, so we've been together for a long time, since 2008. In fact, we went to high school together, so we've known each other for a really long time, but we didn't really connect until after college. And we actually last weekend went and started looking at engagement rings because she definitely wants to get engaged, but I'm so daunted by the task of finding the ring. I don't mind the money; it's fine. We'll spend a lot of money. We'll get. It's just like it's such a consequential purchase that I really had to like be like, I think you need to kind of guide me because I really am going to pick the exact wrong thing that you don't want. So that's actually been kind of one of the more logistical holdups because it's funny too. When we went, I was like, I really like these rings, and they were the solitaires. I think it's like a really classic look, a big rock on just a normal band. She likes the more ornate stuff. So immediately, I was like, okay, well, I would have bought this, this thing for you, and then you would have hated it. So these logistical kind of nightmares are what's holding me up. So yeah, I mean, we're very in love. We're gonna get married eventually. It's just we're busy. She's a doctor. She's a forensic psychologist. I'm busy with work, and I do this stuff on the side with Game Over Greggy and stuff. So I'm not quite as serious as she does, but we are. We're very busy too. So I don't think we're in a super rush, but soon, Eric Jensen, soon. And thank you for putting me on blast.
Eric, we will be taking bets after the show over under 12 months. So, okay, here's another question. This one's just for everybody. So this came from at Vulgar Truths on Twitter. As somebody who watches the game industry closely, what will be most likely to fail? Vita, Steambox, Xbox One, or PS4?
Steambox.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Vita's already kind of failed, right? I mean, it's kind of a hard truth. Like, I love Vita. I'm obsessed with it. It's like an awesome device, and I'm so disappointed that it's failed to launch. But I don't think we're looking at more than 15 million lifetime for that if we're lucky. If it keeps doing the way it's doing in Japan, so I think that's failed. But I agree. I think Steambox is kind of I don't want to say a fool's errand, but I feel like if Steam was really dedicated to it, that they would kind of market it and do it themselves. And so I don't think that they have
to need it too. They want to own the living room, but they don't want to put their back into actually having to make the hardware and deal with those headaches. So they're asking all these other companies. The moment they, what was it at? Was it a CES or something? Like when they had all these computer companies trot out their quote-unquote Steam box, which is just basically a PC, more or less, and there's like 14 of them. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, they're sunk. Like they're directionless and they're not doing it properly. I just don't see the Steam box in the way they're framing it right now. I just don't see that working. I think we're more likely to just see manufacturers. If a Steam box is a computer preloaded with Steam OS, fine. But I just don't see that being something that consumers really want or particularly need.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think, yeah, I agree. Like, it's very fragmented. It's very telling that a company with so much money, so many means, won't do it themselves. Because if they're a smart, savvy company, they make a lot of money. If they thought that there was going to be a lot of money to be made there, they'd do it themselves for sure. I mean, look at the platform they made with Steam and how brilliant it is. They would certainly want to replicate that success elsewhere. Because basically, they don't really need to do anything else than have Steam. I mean, everyone's always like, well, where's Half-Life and all this kind of stuff. It's like, if I was them, I'd be like, we're not going to make any more games. Just here's the platform and, have fun and keep paying us. So I think that I agree with Shawn. Like, I think that it's telling that they won't get involved in it themselves. But I also feel like Vita has been, a failure in its own right, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first saw this question, I definitely thought to myself, this is more of a question of which one's going to fail harder. Personally, I'm leaning towards Steambox, but that conversation has been fleshed out by me on plenty other Geeks of Lives podcasts. So,
a couple more comments in from this now from YouTube. So, if people listening, if you want to ask the question of the guys, just write it down on the YouTube, leave a comment, and I'll take a look at it. Just keep it clean. This one came from I'm not going to try, from some person who says, damn, Shawn is doing a good job selling the Oculus. So, Shawn, if you need a second career, I think you should call Oculus.
If I care about something and I've used it and I like it, I'm happy to proselytize to a degree. I do want to say, like, as really as cool as it's been, there's nothing to play on this. Even if you pre-order one now and you get it in 5 months, you're going to be disappointed if you think you're going to slap it on, fire up Thief or Half-Life 2 and have a great, perfect experience. It's nothing like that. Even Elite, is not a perfect experience by any stretch right now. I think the dev kit too is really cool, and like I said, it's a great place to visit, but I don't think you're going to want to spend the money to get into that unless you're really interested in, like I am, in the more speculative prototyping, just to see, because I think it's just the implications excite me so much. But I think for just the kind of regular user who wants to just play stuff, just cool your jets. I think by the time they get this thing nailed for retail, it's going to be something special. But right now, it's not a great end user experience. It took me 2 hours to figure out how to get it just to install properly. I had to kill a chicken. It was messy, but it worked eventually. And again, you need a really great PC to run this thing well. Like, you really do, because if you don't, it's not that it'll just look bad. It might make you want to vomit physically. So you've got to be really mindful that the investment may not just be getting a Rift. It might actually be dropping $800 and upgrading your PC too.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick. I mean, I'm not nearly as technically proficient as Shawn is about the ins and outs of it, but I mean, playing Rift and then Morpheus were two of the most mind-bending experiences I'd ever had in this industry, and I didn't think that I would ever be a believer in that kind of stuff, and I don't think a lot of people are until they play it. When I was at E3 in 2013 and I played E-Valkyrie, which is just a space shooter game from CCP, it was the only time, really, I've been to E3, I don't know, 7 or 8 times. It was the only time where I actually was like, can I play again? Because it was like one of those things where they took it off, and I'm like, I can't believe this. Like, this is, I'm space shooting, like I'm in an X-wing, and I'm looking behind me, and I see ships, and it works, and I don't know, the promise of VR has been so long in coming, and it seems, I agree with Shawn, I think we're on the precipice. It's just a matter of cost, it's a matter of, like you were saying, ease of access, and it's a matter of processing power and all these kinds of things, but yeah. It is really unbelievable.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I'm one of the people that can't imagine myself sitting in my living room and having this thing on my head and not being able to figure out what's behind me, like, physically, and I just don't know. I'm not a big believer in it, but maybe when I try it, maybe I'll be sold.
You get over it. Just put it in your office, just put like a big lock on the door so you feel safe, and you'll be fine.
I have a kid. I'm not safe anymore.
That's the other thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder if Sony's Morpheus will have a little bit better ease going to market since they have the PS4 to power it, right? Sort of a closed ecosystem, whereas the Rift, does depend on the person's particular build on their PC. I guess that remains to be seen if it even comes out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sometimes we see things, they never make it.
I think Morpheus will come out. I don't know if it, how well it will do. It's the same problem we talked about this on Beyond, where Morpheus seems really reasonable, right? It's got buy a PS4 for $400. The Morpheus might cost, I don't know. They haven't said, maybe $250, $300. Maybe they'll subsidize it. I don't know. So you're looking at like a $700 investment to do this at the least. But it's the same problem they have with Vita. Now, I'm not saying that Vita is like the VR, but Vita is this complement to PS4 that no one really wants because it costs more money. So if you look at the box and you're like, well, I can play Uncharted 4, or I can play The Order, or I can play whatever Media Molecule game is coming out, whatever it is, or I can spend another few $100s, have this kind of experience that I have to play by myself, and no one's really going to be able to enjoy it or experience it, and I'm going to look weird playing it, or whatever kind of hang-up you have about it. I think that there are going to be real challenges on the market for this stuff, and it has nothing to do with anything but, it has to do with ease of use and all that kind of stuff, but I really do think it's going to be a cost prohibitive too. It's just people don't want to, we talked about how expensive PS3 was in 2006. Well, you're talking about the same amount of money, not more, for something that's unproven. So someone's got to take the leap and do it and prove it. And it's not going to be Sony. It's not. So.
Yeah. We have more questions coming in, but let's go ahead and move on to our topic this week, which is video gaming and how it's changed for you as an adult. So looking back from your childhood experiences, high school, college, and then finally now as you play video games today, how have things changed? I think it's good to always start with Kenny because he's always prepared. So Kenny, tell us, how has your approach to video games changed since you were a kid?
Well, I assume we're talking about the ability to play games. So I'll approach it this way. See, I'm looking at The Last of Us Remastered for PS4 over Diablo 3, simply because I know my time commitment in The Last of Us, the single-player campaign. I know what that's going to be. But with Diablo, I'm going to be sitting there and forcing myself to continuously play and play and play. And I know I'm never going to be able to get everything that I want to experience in that title out of that title. I just simply don't have the time for it anymore. So nowadays, when I'm looking at a game, well, I guess I should start in the beginning. Before, one of my favorite games growing up was Baldur's Gate. I loved the open worldness of it. I loved being able to go everywhere, look at every single tile, and unfog the entire map. Nowadays, I find myself, I bought it for my Note 3, my Galaxy Note 3, and I'm literally just going from A to B to C and just completing the quest. I don't have time to find Elminster somewhere or somebody somewhere. I don't have time to do that. And that's why things like Rogue Legacy, I didn't really play things like Rogue Legacy when I was growing up. I guess I don't know. Maybe this weren't. Maybe my memory serves me poorly. But right now, I love Rogue Legacy because I literally play for maybe 5 minutes and die, and so I start back in if I have another 5 minutes, or I don't. I put it down and I go to my work, or I play with my daughter or do something. So I guess my approach to gaming now is a little bit more. Not necessarily apprehensive, but I guess I'm a little bit more unsure of the time that I can devote to gaming. So I approach it uneasily sometimes. I'm more likely to go for the sure thing than I am to go for the underdog.
So let's peel it back a little bit, though, Kenny. Let's get to the heart of the matter. What does gaming mean to you now? Like, what place in your life does it have?
Well, actually, that's something I've been trying to figure out as well. Gaming has just always been a part of my life. I consider it, right alongside a good book. It tells a story. It's a story I can interact with. I'm inserting myself in this experience more than I could with a novel. The unfortunate thing about it right now is that those type of experiences that I enjoy, those story-rich experiences, those 90-hour epics like Divinity, they just scare the crap out of me right now. I don't have time for that. I probably don't have time for a 25-hour game that I'm gonna finish in a month. Seriously, right now. I mean, I've probably played Rogue Legacy more than I've played anything else this summer, and it's only been out for a week. So, it's kind of sad, and that's why I tell you I have to think about it. And I've actually been thinking about it, and it's interesting. I don't know where I'm going to come out. Maybe you'll have to crack the whip, and I'll write something for Geeks Advice.
It's been a while since that's happened. Actually, you did write our review of Wolfenstein, so that was cool.
I did.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
I did.
Yeah, you're off the hook for a couple months.
Woo!
Let's move on to Shawn. So Shawn, why don't you give us your perspective here on what gaming means to you now?
Well, I guess if I look back on what it meant for me when I was a kid, when I was a kid, I wasn't reading about games. I wasn't looking at magazines. That probably didn't happen until I was a teenager. When I was a kid, I liked video games, but my peer group, everybody liked video games. So it was just cartoons, video games. It was just something everybody understood. That's what kids do. So you had a console, and I'd take my allowance, and I'd see what pictures on boxes looked good, and I rented that. And, I ended up renting Contra like 6 times in a row. And it was just sort of an incidental thing. It wasn't until I got older and I was in my mid-teens, I read Computer Gaming World and about Quake, and I just kind of realized, oh, there's people who make these. Oh, that's interesting. People actually make video games. They don't just kind of appear from elves somewhere and then I play them. And I started to pay attention to that more and more. And as I've grown older, I mean, obviously, you get into working on game websites, doing writing, doing podcasting, it changes the flavor. But if I just look at it purely as just playing video games, what do they mean to me now? In a lot of ways, they mean less and less. In a lot of ways, I've kind of gone through this arc where in my 20s and into my 30s, as I've gotten busier because I run a company, we have gamers with jobs that we've always got stuff on the go with, and there's lots going on, and there's lots of other personal interests that pull up my time. In a way, video games have become less fraught. It's become less heavy, like, ooh, I don't know if I can commit myself to this, or ooh, I shouldn't start if I'm not going to finish. Like, all that kind of stuff that sort of can paralyze you, it kind of goes away when you just sort of approach games in, honestly, the way maybe they're meant to be approached, which is just fun. Like, it was just kind of light, loose, like for enjoyment. Maybe enjoyment means you play 4 hours and you never pick it up again. Maybe enjoyment means you play it for 90 hours until you finish. and you don't bathe, and you don't feed yourself for a while. And like it can look like a lot of things. I'm just a lot less caught up now in what gaming should be, or feeling like if I'm not playing games, therefore I'm not relaxing, therefore there's no pleasure in my life, therefore I'm not happy, therefore why am I even alive? And like it's just all that. Like we do get really wrapped up in that, and I'm just finding as time goes on, it's kind of a funny thing. The less I worry about how much, how little, or how I'm playing games, the more I'm enjoying games, and therefore the more I'm playing them. It's like you've almost got to turn your back on the whole concept and the whole question to come to something that's actually what you actually want in the first place. I know that's kind of a weird roundabout way to look at it, but that's kind of been the arc. And I think that all of us here are unique because Colin, you do it you're paid to do it. Like you do it as an actual career. Like that's a very different thing. And even if you do it as a hobby, if you're podcasting about it, if you're writing about it, if you're running websites about it, it is easy to get caught up, and it is totally easy to it gets real big, like it gets real big in your focus and in your attention, and it's the same with, with people who follow, gaming personalities, and they read lots of news sites, they participate in communities, like it gets really big and really important. But what I'm finding is, if I kind of let the throttle go back a bit, kind of loosen the grip a bit, it doesn't mean like games drift off into the sunset. It actually means I'm enjoying the hobby a lot more again. It's just, it's kind of a, when I talk to, I've got a lot of friends who write and do that for a living. It's kind of a luxury, and I recognize that because I just play what I feel like when I feel like it. I don't have to finish something I don't like. It's a really nice place to be. But that's sort of been where I've settled out with gaming, at least right now.
So Colin, what's your take on that?
Well, I think as Shawn alluded to, I think my position is very unique. I'm very blessed, and I'm able to do this for a living and play games for a living and talk about them for a living, and that's really amazing. I've been gaming since I'm 29 now, so I've been gaming since I was like 4 or 5, maybe even a little younger, probably a little younger. And my brother's 12 years older than me, so he really brought me up on NES and all those kinds of things. It's where I really fell in love with Mega Man and Castlevania and Kid Icarus and all these games that were very Zelda. All these games are very formidable in my youth. And back then, what Shawn said about it really resonated with me, which was it just seemed like everyone did it. It wasn't a thing that like I went to school and some guys were this or some guys were that. It's just like everyone played NES, everyone played SNES, and I feel like it's weird because the numbers actually show that more and more people play games, but it feels like less and less people games, right? I should say fewer people play games. But I really think it's just a matter of your perspective as you get older. So back then gaming was a release for me. It was like you only had a finite amount of games, a finite amount of money, or you can go rent a game. So when you get a game like Deadly Towers, which is like a notoriously terrible NES game, you just make do with it, And I was really obsessed with these games. I remember playing Dragon Quest. It was Dragon Warrior on NES, Dragon Warrior 2, 3, 4. At 7, 8, 9 years old, with just those maps laid out before me, Nintendo Power sprawled all over the carpet, and I was just, where's the gold man? Where can I find the metal slime? Like, it gave me like this sense of adventure that never left me. And so as I got older and I got really more into JRPGs and stuff like that in my teen years, gaming became a way for me to escape and immerse myself in environments and different stories. And then by the time I went to college and got into this industry, gaming became, when I was freelancing in college, and now that I do it for a living, it became what I do. And so gaming to me has always been, an essential part of my life, but gaming really is the focus of my life right now. But the way I look at it is this. Everyone's got all these different varied interests, and there are only so many hours in the day, right? And you got to tend to your friends, and you got to tend to your significant other if you have one, or your children, real life things. And so when I look at this list of things that I want to do, I can only select a few of them. And so I really don't watch movies at all. I never go to the movies. It's like a huge joke with Greg and I. Like, I never go to the movies, and I don't watch them at all. I watch like some TV, and I'm like really into football and hockey, right? So I have to, and I read a lot. So it's like I gotta balance all this stuff very intricately. It's like a dance, the ballet. It's just like impossible. And then you realize that like Shawn said, you kind of just have to take a step back and kind of look at it as like you're not trying to force all of this stuff into a finite amount of time. But you kind of have to do it a little more organically. Figure out what makes you happy at the time, and not force yourself to finish a game just to finish a game, or not force yourself to finish a book just to finish a book. You only have so many so many years on this planet. You might as well, take advantage of it. But with that said, games are really important. I think games are in a lot of ways better than ever because there are just more games. There are more variety of games. Everyone's doing all sorts of different stuff. And even though my favorite games of all time, many of them are 20 years old, it's awesome that we live in a world now where we can have Wolfenstein, which is a really great, story-driven shooter. We can have The Last of Us, which is gritty and dark and violent. We can have Rogue Legacy, which is light but difficult. We can have, Metrico, which is a puzzle game. We have all these great different things to select from. So, gaming to me, means, in a way, it means everything. But at the same time, we have to take a step back and kind of, put everything in context and realize we only have so much time to ingest everything. And I also really encourage people to look at gaming and the gaming world and gaming sphere as a sort of scholarly pursuit, because that's the way I look at it. There's so many stories to tell. There's so many great avenues to investigate. It's not all about playing the games. It's about finding the stories behind the games and talking to the people who make them. I was really blessed by IGN to be given free reign to write all these history pieces on all these studios, and I'm writing the history of Sucker Punch right now, and I'm much, Infamous Second Son was a good game, but I'm much more interested in the story behind it, and I can't wait for people to read that story. I think that story is arguably better than the game. I think that if you find the right stories behind all these games, the stories are almost always better than the games. So that's where I stand. I don't know. It's a kind of a winding road, but
No, I like it. A lot of what you've all said aligns with my own take on this question, or I guess these sets of questions. So for me, when I was a kid, I'm the youngest of four, so playing Nintendo, just like what you guys are saying, everyone did it. Well, my siblings did it, and I was just doing what they do, because when you're a little kid, you tend to emulate your older siblings. So I was just doing it too, and I kind of felt like I had a knack for it almost a little bit, where I was beating Punch-Out before my brother, even though he's 4 years older than me, and I was able to set up and use the Power Glove, and he couldn't. He couldn't make it work. Like, I'm really beating up on him a little bit here, but then over time, I started to get more into PC and PC gaming, and I built my first rig when I was a young kid, and really all driven just to get Diablo to install, and I didn't know that it wouldn't run on a 486, right? It's like, what the heck, and they had to have Windows 95, and working through all those things really kind of helped me build character. But I got really into single-player experiences at that time. I think because I was working so hard on my beating my parents down to help me get a sound card, or to help me get a Voodoo video card or something like that, which people don't know what that is, but I know you know what that is, Shawn. So anyway, later on though, it was more social for me, and that's really stuck with me. It's being able to play, not necessarily Call of Duty Online or something like that. It's not really my style, but more of getting my friends together in a room, with pizza and playing Smash Brothers. We played the heck out of Smash Brothers in college. Myself and some of my friends, my cousin, where we would just get food, and we'd play basketball, get really tired and sweaty and stinky, and then just go into a room and play Smash Brothers for the rest of the night. And it was probably the best time of my being a single man without a kid. It was the best time of my life. And that's, for me, that's the highlight of my gaming experiences. So today, as somebody who, like you said, Colin, has all these higher priorities and things that are more important that I have to take care of, right? Like, my daughter has to eat before I play video games. I've got to punch out from work before I play video games.
This isn't South Korea. You do have to.
And honestly, I have to exercise before I can play video games. I have to make sure I'm eating right. I mean, all those things are important. Take care of my wife. Make sure she's happy and she gets to do the things she wants to do. Maybe she wants to work out, so I've got to watch the baby. All those things come first. But me, I have a limited amount of time. I find myself less and less interested in playing Diablo 3, even though I have been playing a little bit lately, but more interested in getting my friends to come over and playing Diablo 3 together. And I think it's really important to fixate on that. The operative phrase is have my friends come over. There's just something about, you call it a LAN party, it's nerdy, whatever you want to say, but there's just something about getting your best friends together in the same room and playing any game, whatever it is, as long as it's functional and it's good, it's fun. it's exciting, right? It's me getting to be with my friends and getting that side of my social desire out. So yeah, for me that's kind of been the big change.
That's definitely an awesome image, with the exception of eating food and touching my game controllers. You will never do that, Joe. All right, just a warning.
We'll see, Kenny. We'll see,
Kenny. Get a nice greasy slice of pizza and then just slide it all over your Vita. No, thank you.
What?
At least you don't have an Oculus Rift.
Oh my God, that's a bacterial nightmare. I'm gonna have to get a whole wipe system going here when people come over. But as a kid, I had a friend who he could afford like every handheld you can imagine. He had a Game Gear. He let me play it once, but he put it in a Ziploc bag first. I had to play it through the Ziploc bag. It was just the saddest thing. I'm surprised it didn't blow up. It had so many batteries in it. I'm surprised it didn't melt, but yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. He was pretty intense about that stuff.
Right. Well, I'm not that crazy.
No, that's pretty funny.
It's a good idea, though, isn't it?
Genius.
So before we get to the end of the show, let's do a quick lightning round. Desert Island games. Okay, so we asked our people on Twitter if you could take any one console with you to a desert island for eternity, and we're not talking. We're taking all the virtual console stuff out of it, any type of digital backwards compatibility out of it. Any one console with games made for that console. Which console would it be? We're going to start with Colin.
NES, I think would have to be the one. Still my favorite console of all time. I still think it has the best front-to-back catalog of any system ever. Just numerous classics. Like I was talking to someone, recently. It's like just even play Mario, like the original Mario, is like a master class in gameplay. Like there are not many games that actually play better than it, and it's kind of funny to think about it in that respect. It's like 30 years old. But when you think about, like I said, Kid Icarus, you can have Mario, Mario 2, Mario 3, Castlevania 1, 2, 3, Mega Man 1 through 6. You can have Contra, you can have Codename Viper, you can have the Dragon Quest games, you can have Final Fantasy and Faxanadu and Zelda 2. Like there's just, come on. Can you really go wrong with that catalog of games? No, you can't. So it would definitely be the NES.
All right, I like it, Shawn.
I think I'd have to. I kind of fluctuate between the PS2 and the Super Nintendo. I think I would probably settle on the PS2. There's a lot of games on that console I never got around to, and there's a lot of really time-consuming games on that console I would never have time to play unless I was on an island. So I think it's probably at the PS2. It's probably got the best. I think it's got one of the best spreads of just different game types. Like it's got such an amazing library built over more than a decade. I think that it's a really I think in terms of just raw, interesting games, and as much as I like the Nintendo, and I've got a lot of nostalgia for it, I'll respect a lot of those games have not aged well necessarily. Like a lot of those games, as who I am now, I've gone back and played them. They don't resonate with me as much as they used to. I think the PlayStation 2 would hold up a little better to my more modern tastes.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah, no worries there. Kenny?
I have to admit, I hate this question, and
you're the one that asked it on Twitter.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I'm the one who came up with it and asked it on Twitter. Yeah, there's that. I guess I'm staring down my own sword right now. But
just say Vita. Just say Vita.
I actually the Vita, until this whole no digital or back catalog crap got rolled around, Joe. That was not my original rules. Okay.
But you can have digital, just not digital backwards compatibility. So you can have Rogue Legacy.
Still, yeah, Rogue Legacy. I mean, it never ends, right? Just keep going. So there, I'll die of starvation on a desert island before I'll finish Rogue Legacy. So maybe the Vita, I guess. No, probably if I had to have disc-based content. How about that, Joe? I think that's what we were all talking about, right? I thought you said Vita.
Disc or cartridge, yeah.
Disc or cartridge, all right. Well, cartridge, fair enough. I'd probably have to say PlayStation 3. And I know that sounds crazy, but the PlayStation 3, at least for me, came at a point in my life where it was a first for me where I was going to college, I was working, and I was living on my own. I was able to produce my capital efficiently to buy games, and so I was therefore able to just consume as much gaming content as possible. Worked with GameStop, worked for GameStop at the time, and was able to just really enjoy the PlayStation 3. So I do have fond memories of that console, and it's still sitting in my setup, obviously. So I'm going to say PS3.
I think that's a good pick. Dark Souls, Demon Souls, I mean, those are two games that could really last you quite a long time on this desert island. And the Uncharted series, Last of Us, there's a lot of great games in the PS3, no doubt.
Yeah, God knows the Uncharted series. The Platinums alone would last me a couple of years.
I do have Platinums on all those games. The only games I have Platinums on. So for me, I'm actually going to pick Super Nintendo because I'm just a Zelda nerd, and I can play Link to the Past a million times over. So that's the only game I need. Okay, and Metroid. Metroid would be good too. Awesome. Well, we did have a couple more questions come in, actually several. So I'll do my best to go through them real quickly, and be respectful of everybody's time. So here's one that I'm going to direct at Colin. This is from Terrell Cunningham. So is the Vita Sony's last shot at the handheld market?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow, some way, do some sort of new Vita iteration, like a Vita 2, and try to refine some of the things that are on it, like maybe give it somehow second triggers, or kind of bulk out its power a little bit. But I just don't think so. I think that they know it's a losing proposition. With that said, I think that they're really happy that it's doing better in their home country. Little known fact is that Vita and Wii U are the only pieces of hardware in Japan up year over year. So Vita's doing fine there, but that's all kind of contextual. It only sold 15,000 units in the United States last month, so it is pretty dead. So yeah, I would say that they would get out of that space. They're being very smart. They're selling off. They sold off Vio. They're working to spin off Bravia. They're focusing on the investments that make most sense to them, and the investment that makes most sense is PS4. So yeah.
All right, very good, very good. So, Colin, this is actually another question directly for you. This is from Engaged Family Gaming. They ask, you mentioned that you view video games as a scholarly pursuit. This is an excellent point and something that I have been thinking about recently. How would you recommend that a casual player, and then it cuts off. So I think they're asking, how can you casually pursue video games as a scholarly pursuit?
Read. There are a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are quite a few great must-read books if you're a gamer. And I would always start with Game Over, which is the history of Nintendo, a really, really great story written in the early 90s. That was updated by my friend Andy Eddy the last couple of years, so there's a new version of that out. Masters of Doom, which is about the creation of id, is a fantastic book. So there are, and Console Wars, which just came out, which is about the creation of the Genesis, is another fantastic book. So these are, this is what I'm talking about. Like, if you find the time and you want to play a game, well, maybe carve out some of that time and read one of these books instead, because some of these books are just fantastic. If you have a lot of time, I mean, you can read Fire in the Valley and all sorts of nerdy books. But I mean, as far as the ins and outs of gaming, I would start with Game Over, Masters of Doom, and that kind of stuff. I mean, Replay. There's a bunch of good books. So jump in and support these authors so that they write more of these great books.
There you go, Shawn. You're into that stuff too, aren't you?
Yeah, less than I used to. Only just, again, it's always just a question of time. I've always really enjoyed getting into the GDC archives and listening to different GDC sessions or write-ups about GDC sessions. Listening to developers talk about their craft to other developers is different than a developer on a marketing tour. It's just you're getting different information, and you're hearing from people you wouldn't necessarily hear from otherwise. So I've always really liked that stuff, and in-depth stuff like Colin writes with the history of different gaming companies. All that stuff is really interesting, and it gives you a knowledge that's actually going to enhance your enjoyment of what you're playing. In the same way that when you do, I know, like even just some rudimentary reading about how movies are made, or like just about some of the people behind movies. In the same way that sports are more interesting, the more you learn about the players, right? Like sports, the story of this player who recovered from this injury and now he's having the best season. Like, it's way more interesting than if you're just watching people on a field run into each other a lot. So I'd always kind of look at just getting to know the personalities, and also just really get into the blog circuit. A lot of developers you've never heard of have really great blogs, and they really go in depth on really interesting stuff. Like, pick a game you like or pick a genre you like and start looking for developers who write about that actively, and you get so much insight. Like, it's really invaluable as far as like enjoying games on a bit of a deeper level.
And a really good example of that, by the way, real quick, just to jump in before you get to the next question. I don't know if you guys saw today, Yacht Club, which is the guys that did Shovel Knight, put up a really awesome blog post, this really meaty blog post about how they spent the money that they got from Kickstarter and their expectations for sales and the split of sales between platforms. I've never seen anything quite that open from a developer before. So much like I was saying, and like Shawn was saying, like these some of these indie devs and some of these just random developers out there, some big, some small, really open themselves up and open up a really a fascinating book as if you were going into an archive. And you should really take advantage of it, because like when I was reading their post today, I was like, it gave you so much insight. They ran out of money when they were making Shovel Knight. You know, they basically weren't paying themselves. They figured out all of these different ways to figure out how to pay like their composer after the fact, and like all of these kinds of things. Really fascinating stuff. So I totally agree. Like, you got to take advantage of all these great resources that are out there.
Yeah, I think particularly if you're interested in, at some point in making a game, which is unbelievably more accessible now than it was even 5 years ago, what a great resource to be able to have an open book, like you're saying, from the Shovel Knight developers, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like like you wouldn't see Guerrilla Games do something like that because Sony wouldn't let them. But when you're independent, you can share as much or as little information as you want. And I think what a lot of these guys realize is the more they share, the more they help other developers. And like that high tide lifts all boats kind of thing with them. So
yeah. Yeah, so here's another question. We'll make this the last question. So, Shawn, why don't you answer this one? Do you think that Microsoft/Xbox will eventually get into the handheld console market?
No.
Alongside the Xbox one. Okay, no, done.
No, they won't. I think that if they're paying attention, they're seeing how even the 3DS, they're seeing how the Vita's going. I think Microsoft is really invested in their phone market and what they're doing over there. And they're kind of also watching PC companies like NVIDIA kind of flail around with the Shield and stuff. So I don't think Microsoft is really looking at that industry as being particularly tasty or profitable. I think they're having enough trouble just getting the Xbox One straightened out and getting good momentum. So I don't think that Microsoft is ever going to get into a game-exclusive handheld. I think that the world is slowly moving on from that mindset. The interesting thing to me, though, is that I'm starting to see kind of a vacuum form, because while the old-school handhelds are struggling in a lot of ways, I'm sensing that mobile games are also kind of struggling. You know, they're starting to solidify, and the gold rush is slowing down, and it's getting to be a few big players and a lot of people who don't really end up making money in the mobile space. So there's going to be a real sort of, middle ground where people are looking for quality games, and they may be coming up short. But even then, I don't expect Microsoft will ever be the company to step forward and fill it. I think if nothing else, like they've never broken into a handheld market effectively, not with their phones, not with the Zune, not with really anything. So I don't see them changing their minds anytime soon with it.
This has been a very disappointing episode for people like me who love dedicated gaming handhelds.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of the situation. I totally agree, just in the sense that mobile, like, I don't want to play games on my phone. Like, that's just not how I want to play games. I'm not interested in that at all. It's very rare when I do. Like, Plants vs. Zombies 2 or something was like the last time I ever even, because I love that game, was the last time I even played a game on my iPad or my iPhone. That's not the way I want to play games, but I also have acknowledged over the years that I am losing that battle. I mean, I always use this as an example, and this was like just a traumatic experience. Like, I went home a couple years ago I imported Vita from Japan. This was December 2011, so it was a month before Vita came out in the States. And I had Uncharted because Golden Abyss was a launch title there. And my nephew's like 6 or 7 years old, and I gave him a PS3 for Christmas like the year before, and he's into gaming. But I sat down, and I'm like, look at Uncharted. Look how beautiful this is. And look at the dual analog sticks, and look how powerful this is. This is amazing. He's like, that's great. And then he brings out his iPad, and he's like, we want to play Angry Birds. And I was like, oh no. Like, we've lost you, little man. Like, you like, and you speak for your generation. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a fact of life. Like, as much as I wanted, Vita and 3DS to do better than they are, it's a, like Sean said, it's a sign of the times. The console sales strangely are higher than ever right now, but like PS4 is still. I think it goes PS4, Wii, and Xbox One are actually the 3 fastest selling consoles of all time. But on the other end, you have the handhelds, which are dying, and I don't think for a second that PS4 and Xbox One are going to keep that momentum up. So we have to see how everything shakes out generally for dedicated gaming as a whole over the next few years, because I think the momentum matters right now, but I think when the dust settles, we're going to see a landscape that we might not like, and that's kind of scary.
Pretty soon we're going to be the crockety old men with the shotgun sitting on the front porch. You don't want the little kids passing by.
To be fair, I already am that person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, let's lead into our final segment where we do our final thoughts. So we do this at the end of every single episode of the Geeks with Wise podcast. We just spend 1 to 2 minutes talking about anything that we want. So I'm actually going to go first because I just want to make sure I get this out there. I haven't been on the show for a little while. Jeff Gordon, who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, he had some really great stuff happen in his life, so he needed to be with his family, but he has been hosting the show to allow me to focus on some other things inside of Geeks with Wives. In fact, you might notice we have a brand new design on the website, which would not have happened if Jeff didn't take this one responsibility away from me. So because I haven't been on the show in a little while, something that I love has not been discussed, and that's Marvel Heroes, which is now called Marvel Heroes 2015 because they're in their 2nd season and they just did a quick rebranding. This game is entirely different than it was a year ago when it launched, and if you were to search the Geeks with Wives website for Marvel Heroes, you'll find interviews, both video and audio. You'll find some articles that several people have written, including myself, about the game. And I encourage you, if you tried this game before and you didn't like it, and let's say it's been more than a month since you've played it, try it again. It's completely changed. This is a Diablo style, so an ARPG, MMO. You're playing online with other people, and you're playing as actual Marvel heroes and villains. It's not. There is some PvP. It's not entirely fleshed out yet, but it's mostly designed for player versus enemy. But playing in groups or guilds, super groups as they call them, and just going through a really well thought out story with great artwork and assets, borrowing from all variety of Marvel properties, whether it's things like Captain America or things you don't know like Squirrel Girl. They have a lot of really good content, and they just launched a bunch of Guardians of the Galaxy content as well, including playable characters like Star-Lord. They've had Rocket Raccoon for a while, but they did a redesign on him because of the movie, and of course Groot and all the others are in there as well. So highly encourage you to try Marvel Heroes. I'm done talking about it, I promise. Final thought, Kenny Newville.
Mine is not gaming related. So this last Sunday, I decided that I was going to barbecue a large chunk of meat. And so I took my Weber kettle grill and I fired up the charcoal, turned it into a smoker, did all that, and cooked spare ribs for 7 hours. 7 hours. That's a labor of love, my friends.
Oh, man.
This is something I feel like every man should do in his life, at least once. At least once. And I can actually compare it to kind of having to watch a child. So first of all, it's a lot of love and care, and you've got to keep going out and checking the temperature. You've got to keep that temperature regulated. So when you've got the lid shut and the ribs are in there, it's kind of like watching a sleeping baby. Is she still sleeping? I don't hear anything. All right, check. All right, we're good to go. And then eventually you gotta open it up, and you've got to change the diaper, right? You got to wrap it in foil, make sure it doesn't lose its juices, put it back on the grill. All right. Anyways, it was a 7-hour experience, and yeah, and those ribs were good. All right. So go out to the store. Of course you have a charcoal grill. Of course you do. So get yourself some good meat and go to the YouTubes or the Googles and check that out and definitely get that done.
Kenny, you had me until you did the whole diaper analogy.
I'm afraid you're going to be exhausted one day and start putting tinfoil on your baby. Like, I'm just worried something bad's going to happen.
Well, she's already got a little tinfoil hat. That's more of a family thing. So.
That's ridiculous, Kenny. I like to barbecue as well. I have a Traeger grill, which is electric, but it uses pellets to give a lot of different flavor. You can get apple, cider, hickory, etc. And the best food I've ever had, Kenny, came off of that Traeger grill where I smoked a pork shoulder for about 9 hours, and I was dumping applesauce, or actually apple juice, on it about once an hour for the first few hours.
Man.
It
You're
was
killing me.
out of this world. It was the best pulled pork I've ever had. Seriously, it was insane. So try to top that, Kenny. We should have a cook-off one day.
I can top that. So for Thanksgiving, my dad cooks the entire Thanksgiving meal on 2 big green eggs. If you haven't seen a big green egg, Google that. It's similar to I believe it's a Komodo. So it's a porcelain kettle style, and you don't need to inject fake flavors because you just use lump charcoal. All right. You use the gifts of Earth to cook this meat.
I have heard of the big green egg. It is amazing. Your dad, also named Ken Newville, is a very, very amazing person. So final thought, Colin Moriarty.
Yeah, so I wanted to, mine's not about gaming either, but I wanted to talk a little bit about a book I'm reading because I really want to recommend it to people. It's by Nick Bostrom. He's a professor at Oxford. It's called Superintelligence. And it's about his basic premise is, yeah, nuclear weapons are scary and global warming's scary and all these things are scary, but the biggest threat is that we're on the precipice of making AI that's going to take over the Earth, and that no one quite realizes it yet. And it's really, really fascinating, and I really suggest that people go and read it. He's basically saying like it's just a really compelling book, and he really makes some interesting points. But his whole point is basically we need to be very careful with the computers we're making because it's not going to take much for a computer to be smarter than a human, and if that computer also can learn and that computer has self-awareness, you better be very scared of what its capabilities are and the fact that it can replicate itself and all those kinds of things. So yeah, so this is by an Oxford, very smart dude. He's a professor of philosophy actually. And I downloaded it last night because Elon Musk actually tweeted it out, and I was like, well, he's one of the smartest people on Earth, so let's see what he's thinking about. And he was like, this book is very compelling, and everyone should read it. So I downloaded it. It was midnight, and I read it for 2 hours, and I'm right up in there right now, and I'm like, this is terrifying, but also really fascinating. So. Go check it out, Nick Bostrom, Superintelligence. It's available on Kindle right now, and I think if you like your hard copy books still, I appreciate that. It'll be out in September, I believe.
That's all.
It sounds like some of the stuff is already happening with Google Maps and Siri driving people off of roads that don't exist and the rivers and.
Yeah, it's like Battlestar Galactica is like one of my favorite things ever. And or Terminator's great too. It's like one of those things that we think about with Skynet or the Cylons. Not possible. Maybe it won't be quite that nefarious, but it's certainly possible that we make self-aware computers that don't take kindly to us. So it's very interesting. It's sci-fi meets hard science, and I think people will really enjoy it.
That's awesome. I'm gonna check that book out. That sounds really good. I've been hungry for a new book. So thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Shawn Andrich, what is your final thought?
Final thought, I'm just going to pimp something that my friend just put out not too long ago. It's a graphic novel. It's more of a graphic novel compilation of different stories called Through the Woods, and it's stories by Emily Carroll. She's Emily Terrible on Twitter. It's an incredible book of horror stories, and her artwork is phenomenal. Her storytelling is amazing. She's been recommended by people like Neil Gaiman and all sorts of people, and rightfully so. She's an incredible artist and a great storyteller, and I can't read more than one story at a time because I cannot sleep after. It's very compelling stuff. So this just came out. It's called Through the Woods, and if you just go check out her website, just Google Emily Carroll. It's Carroll, and check out. She's got some of her comics online you can read. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. She's phenomenal for that. So be sure to check that out. I just want to. Normally, I wouldn't pimp my site overly hard because we don't run ads, so I'm not really worried about generating lots of traffic. But we have been working on some cool projects, and one of them is going to be coming up in the next probably next week or two. One of our stretch goals on our donation drive last year was doing a radio play. So we actually hired a writer, and we've got great actors, and we've done excellent sound Foley work. We're just getting the music wrapped up. that's being made for it. It's going to be a radio play that takes place in Colombia in the world of BioShock Infinite. And it's about a private detective in Colombia who's investigating a murder of a highborn lady who fell into basically the garbage collectors of Colombia underneath Emporia. It's really, really turning out very well, and I'm really excited to share it with people. So, and that'll be free. We'll put it out, and we'll link to it on Twitter and stuff. Yeah, just so keep an eye on that. We've got some cool stuff coming.
That's really cool. And another one of your stretch goals was another podcast about the job side of Gamers with Jobs.
Yeah.
Right. How has that been going?
Good. We've got a 4th episode in the can. We're probably going to be squeaking away at those for the coming months. We still have we want to do about a dozen, and we just they're shorter shows. We just talk about work, and not in terms of here's what I did today, and boy, my employees are dumb, or it's nothing like that. It's more philosophical approach to work, talking about it in relation to our lives, how you approach things, talking about things like going from being kind of like an employee to actually moving up into management, and just dealing with different things, dealing with work malaise, and just dealing with a lot of that stuff. So we do like a little thing. We just call that the Jobs Cast, which is hilarious because it was totally, no one had the Jobs Cast on iTunes, not even like a Steve Jobs fan cast, like nothing. So the domain was there and everything. So that's what we called it, and yeah, and so that's sporadic, but you can actually find it in iTunes now. So it's called The Jobs Cast.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. Huge thanks to Shawn and Colin. So if you want to find Shawn, you can find him at gamerswithjobs.com. He's the host of the Gamers with Jobs conference call, and you just heard him talk about the Jobs podcast. Their weekly podcast comes out on Wednesdays. Really good. They have good equipment, so the sound quality is awesome, and they do a really good job. They have awesome people on the show as well. And also, if you just want to get into a new community and you're looking for some cool people to be to kind of have things in common with and bounce ideas off of, maybe play some video games with, the Gamers with Jobs community is actually really solid. Definitely recommend that you check them out on their website. Their forums they're really great too.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Shawn, what's your Twitter handle so people want to follow you or message you?
My Twitter handle is just @Certis, CERTIS.
So why is it Certis?
I knew you were going to ask, and I wanted to warn you because it's incredibly boring. I just needed a name for, I think it was EverQuest, and the one I usually would have taken back then was taken. So I just grabbed a fantasy book. It was a L.E. Modisett Jr. fantasy book, which I don't recommend. They're very boring. But the map had a little village on it named Certis. So I was like, yeah, that sounds like a thing. And it just stuck. It's just what I've used everywhere since. Because no one ever thinks to take it because it's either from this dumb town and this dumb series of books or it's like a pesticide. So nobody really ever thinks to grab that one.
That's a pretty good story, actually. It's concise. I would have done the same thing probably. And then also a big thank you to Colin Moriarty. Everyone knows Colin Moriarty, right? IGN, senior editor of the PlayStation side. He's on the podcast Beyond every week, although you guys don't necessarily release every Tuesday, right? Just most of the time on Tuesday?
We try to hit Tuesdays, and I wasn't on today, but we still did it on Tuesdays. And, I know some of the people that listen to your podcast listen to Beyond, and we keep wanting to thank everyone. We hit in July 1 million downloads that month for the podcast, and so we're really, 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 really honored and humbled that people listen to Podcast Beyond because it is easily one of the stupidest shows on the internet. So we really appreciate that very much, and thank you so much for your support. And thank you guys so much for having me, giving me a platform to talk today. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we love having you guys on the show. You guys you're fantastic. You're good people, right? We're all doing this for fun, and it's great when you can find like-minded people to talk to. So we pull in guests every single week on our show. So for people who are new, they haven't listened to us before, check the back catalog. We've had some killer guests, not necessarily because they happen to be in the industry, but we have people that are just on Twitter. And like last week, we had a woman on our show who's a mom and advocates for healthy gaming. And she had some really cool ideas. We were dialoguing on Twitter. Next thing you know, she's on our podcast sharing those great ideas on the video feed. So if you want to get into some cool topics and stuff like that, you can just check out our YouTube channel or go to Stitcher, iTunes, and you can find it. We also have 2 other podcasts. We're pretty nutty over here. So Tuesday nights live, we have the Games podcast. On Wednesday, we have a newer show called the Popcorn Podcast that Chad Osuna hosts, and it's more about TV shows and movies. There's a lot of really cool, nerdy and geeky TV shows these days, like Gotham and Daredevil's coming out. Of course, Arrow's been a huge hit for the CWs. They talk about shows like that and some movies. Chad has an incredible Rolodex of, boy, I just dated myself. He has a bunch of contacts on his iPhone of really cool people that are, they're actors, they're stunt people, you name it, writers. They appear on his show. And then on Thursday nights, we have the Comics Podcast, which is now into its 56th episode, and that's hosted sometimes by Chad, sometimes by Casey Walsh. Really fantastic show. We're a little more, clean and family friendly on the Games Podcast, not on the Comics Podcast. No. It's F-bombs. I swear there's audible nudity. I don't know. There's just the worst things possible happen on this show. But Darth Vader has made 2 appearances, so you never know what happens when you watch the Comics Podcast. So thanks to everybody for participating today. We really appreciate it. You can find us on Twitter at Geeks with Wives. Go to our website, geekswithwives.com, where we cover everything from video games, movies, comic books, you name it. And we will catch you guys next week.